Hey guys, Ben Nash from Pivot Wealth here, and today I'm really pumped to be talking with one of our lovely clients, Nicola, coming to us all the way from Noosa. Nicola has literally just finished sort of going through the initial planning process in the last couple of weeks. So I'm keen to sort of get some of the insights, the things that surprised you about the process. But Nicola, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, I think a good place to start is really just if you could just tell us a bit about where things were at before you came to see us.
Yeah, cool. So I think the main thing that was happening in my life is I was a little bit frivolous, right? So I didn't really have a plan with my money, would not necessarily paycheck to paycheck, but absolutely just be spending as I go and not really thinking about the consequences, which means I had a good and fun lifestyle, but also sort of gave me a little bit of a fear around the future. So I guess, yeah, before sort of chatting to Pivot, I was a bit more frivolous and, yeah, spending as I go.
Yeah, it's interesting that you see that we see it a lot with people that, especially if they're starting to sort of like hit their straps in their career, and your income creeps up, and especially you being in tech, that there's like employee share stuff going on, and it almost gets to the point where your biggest risk is around really just doing nothing. But tell us, like, what were some of the key sort of challenges or frustrations for you at that time?
I think it's the classic. You don't know what you don't know, right? And so you're just sort of living each month to each month and just sort of spending as you go. And I think I just had no clear plan for my money, or no clear plan on how to really make my money work for me. So like you said, I've done well in my career, and I'm in my early 30s, which means I've always been able to live the way that I wanted to live without really any consequence. And I think I don't have enough time, or probably enough interest, to spend time looking at what I should be doing better with my finances. And I guess that's what was happening, right? I was just sort of spending as I go with no clear plan. Yeah. So that was the main challenge, right?
And it's funny, like, as I say, that I know from the conversations that we had sort of early on that it was something that had been on your mind for a little while. But as I say, there is this it's sort of like almost an inertia, or that you should do something, but not sure what to do. What do you think is the biggest barrier that stops people from getting started?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I guess for me, it was not necessarily fear, for lack of a better word, I guess, but more like the unknown. Also, like I said, I live a fairly good life, and I guess you're worried that you're going to be all of a sudden restricted to, eating 2-minute noodles, and not being able to still live in a similar lifestyle. But I guess and we may get to this later, I guess one of the biggest benefits of this process is realizing you don't have to live like that. It's just making your money work a little bit smarter for you, and doing smarter things to help, I guess, fund your lifestyle, but also fund a more stable future.
Yeah, I think it's that you've got to find the balance is key, but it is.
Yeah.
It's funny when people first initially engage in the process. It's common. There's that little gap between, like, while you're waiting to get started, and we find that people will sort of rush out often and make some purchases that they know, because they feel that it's going to be more restrictive than it actually is afterwards. So. Yeah, definitely interesting. Tell us, Nicola, what actually prompted you? What was the catalyst that prompted you to do something about
it? Look, I've been putting it off for so long, just so long, just being, knowing that I'd saved a decent amount in cash, knowing I had my stock programs. And I think, like you said, it's apathy and not wanting to sort of get involved in this process, of fear of what you just mentioned around, I'm going to be restricted. Maybe I'm not in a good position. So I think the catalyst was, with COVID and everything that was happening, it sort of makes you realize how easy things can change, and how easy things can change for the worse, but also for the better, right? I'm not trying to be negative, but and so that just sort of made me take stock about my future more. I think just saying, like, okay, well, I'm in a good position, and let's make sure that I'm not just living in the moment so much, and trying to create, I guess, a more feel more comfortable with my future, right? Feel more comfortable with where I'm going. And I think education is key. And that's sort of what I've got throughout this process, is leaning on your advice, but also educating myself as well. So.
Yes, yeah, it's almost like a training program for your money to sort of increase your financial IQ. But I think you're right in that COVID has definitely got a lot of people to sort of rethink what's important to them. After that initial sort of shock of the world, wondering if the world's going to end, and the panic buying of everything, that people would sort of realize that wasn't going to happen, and then sort of thinking about like what's important. Actually, maybe I should have a bit more security behind me, because if everyone was stressed about their job, a bit more of a
I won't show you my stash of toilet paper, but panic buying everywhere. I'm just joking. But yeah, exactly that, right? So I think it does make you take stock a little bit more. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I just actually saw something the other day that toilet paper sales in the US are down like 300% from the previous year.
Ridiculous.
Everyone had their stockpile, and now they're just
I'm proud to say I didn't panic buy like anything like that, but I definitely spent. But I don't think it was COVID related. But just not on holidays.
Yeah,
I think also when you talk about the catalyst. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to tell you about how I bought some gym equipment that I never actually used for home.
Everyone panicked like they never get to the gym again, or like didn't work out before, but now all of a sudden massive like gym junkie and need to get home equipment. Yeah, it was an interesting time, wasn't it?
A crazy mentality, and it sort of ties into the way that people invest money as well. It's like everyone's buying gym equipment. I better buy some gym equipment. There won't be any left, and it's like the whole herd thing. So, sorry, I cut you off. The other catalyst you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to say like the catalyst was also. And regarding to pivot directly, right, is there's sort of this mystique and around financial advisors and sort of the reputation in the market, right? And I think I was sort of thinking about it, but being warned off by a few people. And then finally I spoke to one of my friends who sort of recommended pivot and recommended, I guess, a different approach to financial advice. And that was also something that I thought, well, you know what, like, looking online, looking at Pivot Wealth in general, I thought there was some good synergies in terms of like my values, but also my like line of work, and that was sort of a catalyst to actually just reach out to Pivot directly as well. So.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of unfortunately, historically, financial advice just wasn't really that good. There were definitely some really good, great, like fantastic advisors that have been in the game for a long time, that were doing good things. But I would say that I think it's pretty fair to say that as a majority, that the standards were just not where they should have been. And I think it's one of the things that we see quite a lot is with like parents' generations, and it's obviously people don't want to always get full financial advice from their parents, but it's generally their opinions are important, and you get to chatting to them about stuff. And for people that were getting financial advice 10, 20 years ago, they're probably not getting the same standard as what's available or what's probably more out there today. So that in itself can be a big barrier, because they're not really saying that they're saying that the old financial advice is good as opposed to what we get today. But what sort of gave you the confidence to avoid that noise and take the leap? Because I think ultimately it is a bit of a leap of faith when you go down this path. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think there's a shift in the world in general about better sort of customer experience and better customer outcomes. And I think that, with I work in technology, so that's a massive sort of a crux of what we sort of talk about. And I think that experience that I had with Pivot, I mean, I reached out because my friend recommended you, and I thought, on the surface looked like a good company and aligned with what I was sort of wanting to do. And then obviously going through that initial, I guess, pre-sales activity with Pivot and those initial conversations, I think I just felt confident. I felt that you were listening. It wasn't about a hard sale. It was, educational throughout that process. And that's sort of what made me think, you know what, I'm just standing still at the moment. I'm spending money on other things. Why not take an educated risk on something that's probably going to give me better return, right? Because at the moment I'm standing still and I'm spending money on other things. Why not sort of pardon the pun, but pivot and spend with you.
Do something, yeah, because you've got to, doing that in action trap just means you're missing the opportunities to build momentum. But look, obviously we covered a fair bit of ground through that initial sort of the planning process itself. Tell us, what were the sort of the top 2 or 3 things that had the biggest impact for you?
The biggest impact, I would say the biggest light bulb moment was sort of, and maybe everybody says this, but going through that outgoing spreadsheet, when you're sort of putting down all of your different outgoings, what you're spending your money on each month, like food, Uber Eats, unfortunately, pubs, bars, restaurants. I think putting all that in black and white is actually quite an interesting process. Even little things like working out that, Netflix, Spotify, I've spent Lumery, which is a podcast platform. All of these little subscription services add up to a decent amount of money. And I think now we're very quick to spend, and you don't realize how much it all sort of accrues up over time. So, I thought that was quite an interesting thing. Looking down as well, it wasn't as bad as I thought. But there was definitely some interesting moments of understanding where your money is actually going, which I would never have done before. I would have a gut feel, and a lot of the time your gut feel is completely wrong.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's always interesting to see it all on paper, and it's surprising that how something so that seems such a simple thing like doing a budget can cause you to really come to some realizations with how you are prioritizing your money. But it's easy. There are 2 parts of that. One, it's easy, this lifestyle creep that you get, that you add on a Netflix subscription or a Spotify premium, and then another thing and another thing and another thing. But then, in each moment you go, it's $12 or it's $15 or something like that. But then you look back and go, actually, I'm spending, hundreds of dollars on this every month. And you sort of get used to it. So I think it's good to, take stock of those expenses on an ongoing basis. Yeah. Just make sure that you're getting real value for money from them.
It's not to say that you have to get rid of those services or reduce your Netflix subscription, but it's just about the awareness of like, okay, cool. Like you think it, like you said, it creeps up. You're adding things here and there, and then all of a sudden it's $100, $200 a month or something like that. And it's just more about awareness and education.
Yeah, I know for me that, and the other part of it is, and you know this working in tech, but these companies make it so easy for you to spend.
No, we don't.
Well, I'd say you guys are pretty clear from your side. But if you think of something like an Uber, it's like you're pressing buttons and you don't see anything, and you link your cards up, and it's not like you're having to take money out of your pocket and pay for a taxi or take your card out and do that. And I know, like for me personally, when this is years ago, but when Uber came out, that I linked everything up, and then I was catching Ubers all the time. It was only when they started doing the reporting, because on the business plans that they have a monthly report that they send out, and I was spending like $300 or $400 a month on Ubers, and I was just like, I live 30 minutes walk from the city. Like I should really just not be lazy and just walk. And really, it's again going back to priorities, that if I say I'd rather have $400 a month to put in a travel budget or in a savings account or investment account or something like that, but because it is so easy, well, that's it. It's so easy.
You're a little bit oblivious, and you're a little bit oblivious as you go through that. I was the same with Uber actually. Like I was, like probably a year ago, I ended up buying a Vespa to try and to curb some of that. But just like Uber all the time, like it's not necessarily lazy, just probably lazy. Just like Uber here, Uber there, like not thinking. And then over a weekend or a midweek or something like that, you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
It is very, very easily done. Tell us, other than the savings planner, what else sort of had an impact from that planning process?
So that was sort of more from my process going through that in the beginning before I actually met with Joel. I think one of the biggest things for me is that I had a decent amount of cash savings sitting in my bank, and sort of throughout this process, I realized how that's almost just standing still. Like I think that was the biggest moment for me. That and the stocks was just sort of my employee stock program. Sorry, but the cash savings, that I've had cash sitting in my saving account, low interest saving account, for years, and it's just been sitting there. And I think going through that process with Joel around when he did the financial modeling of leaving it in the bank and then moving it out to different investment channels, I think that was the biggest moment for me. All this time I've been sitting there, and it's just that cash has just been sitting there, not really doing anything. And now I've seen that, I feel like a bit, why wasn't I doing this 2 years ago, right? No matter how small or big that investment is, having a lump sum of money in your account, unless it's your safety net or it's there for a particular reason, why not try to make money off that money rather than sitting in a low interest account? I think that was a big moment for me.
Yeah, and I think it's when you think about inflation as well on the money, that the cost of doing nothing, you're actually probably going a little bit backwards, given that interest rates are so low at the moment as well. So but it's also a very common thing that when people go through this process, that they come to that realization, and you're always kicking yourself, wishing that you started 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But that's always the best time to start, but the second best time is now, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Obviously, we covered a bit with you got an employer share plan as well. What sort of, if any, were the shifts around or realizations around that?
As in what way? As in what I learned throughout that process, or?
Yeah, and how, if you've changed your approach, what was sort of the trigger or learnings from sort of diving deep into how they work and the strategies around that?
Yeah, sure. So I think with a lot of tech companies, there's a lot of benefits for working in the tech industry, and one being the employee stock program. And so I've always, and this is a terrible story, but I think after 2 years of working there, I remember, don't I have stocks in Salesforce? Sorry, I probably shouldn't say Salesforce, but maybe we can edit that out. Sorry. But I was like, after 2 years of working, I realized I'd had, company stocks, and I just thought one moment, I should probably log in and see what that's about. And I was obviously pleasantly surprised that it had been forced savings over that 2 year period. But I literally had no idea that I just sort of signed up to be putting that through. So, in some ways it was forced savings, but I started to accrue a certain amount, and it felt like I was really, over invested in one stock. And that was another sort of catalyst in coming to chat to you, because I was like, I've all got my eggs in one basket, essentially. So throughout that process, throughout the planning process, it was good just to assess the different options, like modeling out what it looks like if I kept my stocks in the share program, what it looked like if I diversified and take some of that stock out and invest in an investment property. And we really modeled out those different scenarios. And so the things I learned was more around sort of capital gains tax. I think the benefit of bringing out, and you'll probably know this more than I will, but taking out sort of longer invested or longer vested stocks to reduce capital gains tax. There was a lot of these sort of dark arts that you guys sort of went through to work out how to I guess maximize that investment and then diversify that portfolio, because like I said, I'm over capitalized or over invested in one stock, which is risky, right? So going through that process of, can we draw down on some of that stock, still keep investing in that because you're getting a discount up front from my employer, but then being able to diversify in a property portfolio or within another sort of fund, which was quite interesting and something that we're going to go ahead with.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people don't realize, and it's good to participate in these plans. Like you say, there's an element of forced savings. Plus, over the last few years, with the exception of the downturn from COVID, that there has been a pretty significant rally in tech companies. So yeah. You benefit from that upside. But I think a lot of people come to the realization when you do sort of explore all of the options sort of in the light of day, that when you're holding on to these shares, that you're actually making the decision that buying the shares in the company that you work for is the very best investment that you can make. And that's often consistent with the fact that if you had $10,000 or $100,000 that you wanted to invest, you say, would you invest it in the company that you work for? Most of the time, the answer is no. But it's funny that we just don't think about it in quite the same way.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to sort of my lack of experience and understanding in investing into stocks in general. So for me, I was like, okay, well, I'm sort of being part of that world a little bit, but it's almost a safe way to do it. But as you accrue and as you sort of build up that investment over time, then you realize, well, I'm sort of invested in one stock, which is high risk, right? I mean, it also could be high reward, but I think the biggest part for me throughout this process was just getting a good plan in place to be able to have a more stable and predictable financial future, and then also how do I start to look at my stock program, because that to me was a bit of an abyss when I go in there to have a look around, like the benefits, what to be doing with it, when do I draw down? Like, to be honest, there's so much information and it's quite overwhelming. And I think Joel was great throughout that process of educating me about the benefits of the stock program, long-term capital gains tax, like I mentioned before, things around I'm getting an upfront discount. So there's some complexities through that process. And Joel really helped me through that process of education and working out what to do with that. So.
It's often a game changer, because it is a big deal, and you want to make sure that you're actually capitalizing on the benefits that your employer has provided and actually profiting from it instead of just being a passenger. But tell us, Nicola, how are you feeling about what's going on with your money now compared to how you were feeling before?
Yeah, I feel more empowered, to be honest. I feel more confident that there's a plan in place. And look, it's still early days and I'm still going through the process with Pivot. But I feel more confident and empowered because I've educated myself throughout the process, something that I'm not typically interested in, but I've, had to, I guess, get interested. And it's shine a light on a lot of things that I probably just didn't know about. And now I feel more confident in more confident in the future, or more even in the immediate future, right? And I'm not worried about, okay, well, now I'm sort of having a bit of buyer's regret, or I'm going, I've just bought this and I probably shouldn't have, or maybe I need to do more with my finance. I'm feeling like, no, there's a plan in place. I still have flexibility around that plan, and that can change and evolve as time goes on, depending on what happens in your life. But I just feel more confident about that. In 5-6 years, I'm making smarter decisions.
Yeah, I think that it's it's great to have a great plan, but we know that things don't always follow our nice, neat spreadsheets over time. That would make our jobs a lot easier. But
maybe the dream,
yeah, and I think that it's a common sort of misconception that people think that you have to give up flexibility when you put a plan in place. It's like the plan is we're thinking ahead. We're thinking 2 steps ahead to make sure that the decisions we're making now aren't going to stop you from doing anything that you want to do in the future. But we're also making sure that you've got the flexibility to adjust things. And
I think the automated part, right? Because for me, in some ways, I need some, like, there's flexibility in the plan. I think that's sort of what has come out of it. There's flexibility around, you want to save for a holiday, you want this money to spend on eating out and going out, and that's all built in. But then there's the automation piece, which I really liked around, okay, so we're going to set this master bank account up, and every month or every time you get paid, all of these little things start to happen for you. So take some of the grunt work out of it. And I think that's the daunting part. If you're having to do that manually or try to set those rules and automation up on your own, then that's where it becomes difficult and it's hard to manage. Whereas if you have that foundation in place, it takes the risk out of it. It takes a risk out of not following the plan as well. And it makes you more accountable and more aware of what you're spending.
Yeah, I think, again, it's easy to spin your wheels because everyone's so busy with what they're doing in their lives that if you're having to do that grunt work, as you say, that it's when you hit a roadblock or a speed bump, and it's like you have to do this form or do this other thing, and then you don't know what to do, and then you just too hard basket, got other things to be thinking about, and then the wheels sort of fall off, and it just takes longer and is slower going along the way. But Nicola, I think before people go down the path of getting financial advice, I think they often don't really know what exactly how it works or what to expect. What sort of surprised you about going through the process?
I think about the level of involvement from your end, right? I sort of thought that there would be like one meeting and I'd tell you what I was spending, and then you'd come back and be like, spend less here, do this here. And I think the one thing that I really valued throughout the experience was the level of involvement that you all had throughout the process, and that you're always there. Like even you, Ben, like, being able to, message you or send you an email and ask you a question about the process was really valuable, and it makes you feel more confident and comfortable with the process. So I think that was the biggest thing for me. Like, there's a lot of involvement on your end throughout the process, and it's not just like, hey, here's the one session, here's our advice, see you later. It really felt like we were doing it in a partnership, and that made me feel more confident and comfortable.
Yeah, I think that people don't really understand how much detail you need to get into to be able to really have the very best strategy for yourself. And it's like, it's also, ties in with people when they talk about, how much financial plans cost. And you sort of think, well, it's actually we're just having a couple of conversations, and then you're going to write me write up this financial plan. But thankfully that's the compliance framework around financial advice is in place to ensure that that thoroughness is there. But I think that you don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes to make sure that we're making robust decisions.
And what I was going to say, like, we're in this world of like instant gratification and instant reward. And I'd say one thing that has been good throughout this process that aligns with that a little bit is, yes, as me, I had to provide information, and I had to, invest some of my time in giving you the right information. But a lot of the legwork is done by you, right? A lot of that hard work, a lot of that comes from your team, and that's great for someone that's time poor or not interested. It means that you can sort of fast track some of those earnings, right? So that's been good too.
Absolutely. And it's also making sure like that accountability to get through the process. And that's part of the reason why we book the 3 sessions in the process at the front, because then it's going to happen here. Because if we just said, just pull this stuff together, then it'd probably take weeks instead of 1 week, and then make these decisions, that it forces you to sort of make the next, we're going to explore some options. Obviously you don't need to decide on the spot, but you do need to decide, so the process can just mean that it happens, as opposed to thinking about it and sitting on your to-do list for ages but never actually coming together.
Yeah, and I really like that methodical approach to the engagement as well, to be honest, like having those 3 clear sort of meetings with what to expect, the outcomes of that. And I think that helps you sort of stay on track, because like I said, it's not for everyone, particularly me, no offense, Ben, but it's not the most interesting topic for me. Finance sort of bores me a little. I'm not that interested in it, and so it can be something that people put off because of that, or they don't know what they don't know, and it's like daunting. But I think having that methodical approach, knowing what to expect, really sort of helps that process and makes it easier.
Yes, and also the fact that you're only making the CFO level decisions, as opposed to trying to working down in the weeds. I think for people that are, then you can be more interested, because everyone's interested in, what their lifestyle is going to be in the future, or how
absolutely
take to get to where they want to be. But not everyone wants to know that this bank is better than this bank, is better than this ETF, is better than this other thing. So
absolutely not.
We try to keep it up there for you. But what do you think would be different if you try to do it all yourself?
I wouldn't have done it. There's no way. Look, to be honest, you crowdsource answers by chatting to your friends or Googling or whatever. But to be honest, it would just be paralysis by analysis. I just would have just been looking at stuff, too scared to make a decision. Wouldn't have maybe bought a house or property, but like completely flying blind in terms of how much do you want to spend? Is it an investment property? Do you want it to be, do you want to occupy that property? Yeah, to be honest, it just probably wouldn't have happened then.
Yeah, I think that it's when you're 25 and you're talking about talking to your mates about which high interest savings account you should use, or if they're investing money, maybe throwing a bit of money into shares, that the decisions can be, you can crowdsource decisions and it's not that big a deal. But when it comes time to making, you've spent a lot of time saving up a bunch of money and you're making 5, 6 or 7 figure decisions, it's pretty difficult to build that level of confidence to actually make it happen without that fear, without it not being super scary.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think it's as easy as just reading The Barefoot Investor and you're good to go for the rest of your life. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. Otherwise, you could just read one book and sort it all out. And I'm sure, of course, it's going to give you little nuggets and little food for thought and help educate you. But it's complex. It's not, there's some complexities to the process and you need experts. And, I'm glad I sort of engaged with an expert.
And what do you think, just on that, what sort of situations do you think lend themselves to having a financial advisor?
I think, to be honest, all situations really. Everyone's different, but it's just whether you, want to invest and invest in a financial advisor. I think going through this process of whatever scale, I think is a benefit to anyone because, like I said, even small parts, which is probably what everybody said, going through that budget process, going through your expenditure, and then realizing these small little things can make massive improvement. And I think that can be at any scale. It doesn't really matter how much you earn or how much you have saved. But for me, it was more around the stock program, right? And having a bit of cash savings. Those were the two main drivers that I thought, look, I'm not educated enough in this area to be able to make really informed decisions to make my money work for me better. And that was the main driver for me, and that complexity in my commission. I also have a commission-based role, so I don't have a predictable income outside of my base salary. So trying to work out, how really best to manage that as well. And so that they were the main sort of, 3 things: commission, stock program, and cash savings that I really wanted to make better decisions with.
Yeah, and you mentioned the investment there, and ultimately, this getting any sort of service is you pay a fee for that service. But I know that you and I, and with Siobhan as well and the team, initially we spent a lot of time sort of talking about the investment, and we fully recognise that it's not a small amount of money when you're paying thousands of dollars for a financial plan, but looking back, and I know that we talk about, there's only so much information that we can give, and ultimately you do need to sort of take, you mentioned at the start, sort of an educated risk. Looking back on the investment, what in your mind, what makes those fees worth paying?
Well, for me personally, I think it's the ability to outsource some of those not hard decisions, because at the end of the day, we're making the decisions on our financial future, but being given the tools and the right information to make better decisions. And I think if I looked at and again, I can't talk for everybody, if I look at my particular situation with, like I mentioned, the stock program and all of those different things, it's just something that I physically don't have the time for, nor the interest to be able to do that. And so when I look at the outlay in terms of investing with you, I think it's just now being able to really have a high level understanding of where my future is going with my finance, and being able to outsource that to somebody that's going to really have my back, help me make better decisions. And without your engagement, I would still be making no decisions and be no further forward. And I think that's where the value comes back for me, is that now I have a clear plan in place and I feel comfortable over the next couple of years where that's going. And obviously, like we said, that changes. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a framework that I can work towards.
Yeah, and I think that outsourcing is really, everyone's time is valuable, and it's obviously the more you earn, that the value of your time sort of increases. That you want to make sure that you're valuing that in the right way, and having to spend so much more time than what it would take to just get somebody else to do it for you. But also, the quantifiable benefits I think that you see from the advice process. I was just looking through some of your stuff, and I see that it's like, several multiples of the initial investment. was that I suppose seeing it all there, the way that we demonstrate it through the documentation that we provide, was that something that surprised you, or any sort of was that something that surprised you?
Yeah, I really had no idea what to expect, to be honest. Like, I hadn't gone through a process like that before. But yeah, I think it was like the financial modeling piece. Is that what you mean, where you're sort of showing like what this could look like in 2 years, 5 years, by the time you're 45, by the time you're 50? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and the upside that you see as a result of doing that. And I think that people are often going like, where is the value, or tell me what I'm going to get, which we never know, because we never know what you're going to choose to do. But it's often
absolutely. I think, having that in black and white, and again, it's a guideline, it's a framework, it's not a silver bullet. I get that. It's not like I'm like, cool, all right, let's sit back now, I'm going to be a trillionaire in 5 years. Obviously not, right? But it's giving you that insight and foresight, I guess, into what could happen if you make these small decisions. Because some of them are big decisions, right? Am I going to buy a property? But some of them are just small decisions about your day-to-day or your week-to-week, or, the way that you invest small amounts of money. It doesn't always have to be this grand gesture to get you there, right? It's all these, like, shavings make a pile, right? Like that's sort of the approach. And I think seeing that in black and white, seeing the different types of options, or, types of options moving forward, whether you invest in this or that, that was really valuable. And that's something that you can take away, right? That's something that you've got, to help you make decisions in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that clarity piece, that you're not always just trying to do the very best thing, because you've got to be able to manage your risk and sleep at night and all of those sorts of things. But having the control and being able to pull the levers is a big part towards that empowerment. Nicola, last question for you though is for someone that's watching along, sort of looking to get help with their money, what would be your tips for them?
Do it now. I mean, if you're at this point where, and I'm sure everybody says that, but do it now, because I wish I did this 5 years ago, and I imagine everybody says that. I really, really wish that I educated myself sooner and made these decisions sooner, because I'd be in a better financial situation today. And I'm sure everybody does say that, but it's true. Like, it's the unknown and the fear of investing. It's a fair amount of money in this process, and you're worried that it's not going to give you a return. But I feel like already, even throughout this process, I've learned enough to feel confident in moving forward. And I think, that the biggest advice would be get going, just do it.
Yeah. Normally, just to qualify, what people say is that they wish they'd done it 10 years ago. But
5 years ago, no, I've lived a good life. I didn't want to, I spent well over 10 years. So 5 years is fine.
But it's that benefit of hindsight. It's the same when you look at investing or property markets, or, taking this sort of action. But the good thing is, when you've still got a lot of time on your side, that power of compound interest is a magical thing. So, sometimes there's this bit of fear, or maybe shame is the wrong word, but like people are like, oh, I missed the boat, so I'm just going to do nothing. But it's just compounds the problem and makes it even worse. But again, there's a lot of psychology that sort of sits around it. So it's easy to sort of fall victim to that if you let it. But
Nicola, and I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody does it to a degree, because we've all thought about it. When we get our money, we have these thoughts, and then time goes on, and it's just what happens. But you just don't want to let that sabotage your future. And I think some good tips there. Nicola, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time and those insights. Looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.